ducks like a quack.
So now we have if it ducks like a quack. This is the bit I truly love. It's what I do best, debunking myths and misinformation online. So let's get to the first one. You should cut out all carbs if you want a six-pack. Now there's lots of layers to unpick here. Number one, it doesn't need to be your life goal to get a six-pack. And having a six-pack doesn't necessarily mean that someone is healthy. And if you want to really dive into the science behind it, everyone has a six-pack. Everyone has a rectus abdominis muscle, and it's just covered by varying degrees of fat above it. For the average person, getting a six-pack means having a low enough body fat percentage so that you can see the grooves and indentations in the rectus abdominis muscle. And a common route for people to achieve a six-pack or more definition may be losing body fat by means of a calorie restriction, having less calories consumed than calories burned. Carbohydrate-rich foods tend to be, on the whole, less satiating. Things like rice, bread, crisps, these things make you feel less full. They're also more moreish. You tend to overeat because they're hyperpalatable, they're convenient, they're easy to digest, so you tend to eat more of them, and you can also end up eating more calories. So people who tend to go on these carb-free diets or severely restrict the amount of carbs they have tend to lose a lot of weight rapidly initially because they cut out some of these hyperpalatable, high-energy foods which are easy to overconsume. But carbohydrates are a very important macronutrient. It's your brain's primary source of fuel, it's used in your muscles, and you generally need it as a fuel source. And carbohydrate-rich foods also tend to be foods which are high in fiber as well. If you think about your grains, beans, all of these things, they usually have a moderate to high carb amount, but also a moderate to high fiber amount. And we know, and especially if you listen to me, you know that fiber is key for your gut health and your bowel routine as well. You need fats, you need proteins, you need fiber, and you need carbohydrates because life without carbohydrates is just a very sad life. Your teeth need to be white. Societal expectations have us thinking that teeth need to be pearly white. They do not. The natural color of your teeth is actually off-white and maybe even a little hint of yellow. Now, there are certain things you do and certain habits that you might subscribe to which make your teeth stained even more yellow than they should be. Things like smoking or excessive tea or coffee consumption. But the myth that your teeth are meant to be white is just that. It's a complete myth. And the overwhelming flood of influencers online with their shiny glow-in-the-dark teeth make you think that your teeth need to be white. They don't. In fact, even with age, our teeth will probably become slightly more yellow as the enamel, the outer coating of the teeth, slightly wears away and the inner, more yellowish surface is revealed. In fact, as you grow older, the outer enamel layer, that white layer, wears away and it exposes that inner, slightly yellowish dentin layer. And as a precautionary note, this is also why you should avoid brushing very aggressively because you can actually damage and wear away that outer enamel layer. Just before we go, let's have some listener questions in crowd science. The first question this week is from Karen. As an allergy sufferer, I'm struggling to tell the difference between the wide range of antihistamines on the market. They vary in price and I assume in other areas. Could you provide advice on what to look for, and does more expensive mean more effective? Karen, that's a great question. Let's dive into it. Now, during allergy season, you may be floored by pollen and you may have lost the war against nature, but fear not. There are some things that you need to do. Medication may help a lot of people, but you need to also make sure that you're doing these other things as well. These are very basics that you should be doing. Every time you go out, try to wear wraparound sunglasses so the pollen doesn't come into contact with your eyes and trigger those itchy, annoying hay fever type symptoms. Try to limit the amount of washing that you do outdoors because the pollen can get trapped in your laundry and then you bring it inside the home. And even if it's hot, try to limit the amount of times you open doors or windows because the pollen can come inside and also harass you indoors. Pollen can also get trapped in your nostrils, so you may want to irrigate these with some sort of neti pot or a nasal spray to get rid of the pollen that's trapped in your nose, and it can get into your sinuses as well. Now, these are all conservative, non-medical options, and clearly these may not work for everyone, and you might also want to try some medication to help relieve symptoms. You have some basic antihistamines and medications that you can use specifically for hay fever. Chlorphenamine, which is an antihistamine, cetirizine, loratadine, you may have heard of these things. And another thing now which is available in the UK not prescription anymore. I'm not sure about other countries, but it's called fexofenadine hydrochloride. That is the generic trade name of this medication. Now, as you mentioned, some of these allergy hay fever medication may vary in their price, and that's why you need to look at the active ingredient. For example, I mentioned fexofenadine hydrochloride. Look for the active ingredient in this and pick the medication that is the cheapest. Often the branding makes something more expensive. You can get the same quality, the same efficacy for something that is a lot cheaper, as long as you focus on buying the thing with the active ingredient. As always, this is not medical advice, so if you're planning on starting a medication, you need to make sure you consult with your doctor, or are at least aware of any drug interactions they may have with your existing medication, and also be mindful of any medication allergies you might have as well. Make sure you look out for the active ingredient. That's the main takeaway from this. And also make sure you can reduce your exposure to pollen by all these conservative measures as well. You may find if you do those things, you may not even need medication. Karen, thank you very much for that question. Hope that you can beat pollen this season. Let's move on to our next one. And our next question from Nicole: I've been taking an anti-anxiety medication, sertraline, for the last 6 months, and I think my libido has reduced. Is it possible that it's related to the meds? And if so, what should I do? I don't want to come off it because it's really helping with the anxiety. To hear my full response to Nicole's question and many more questions, make sure you download the additional episode of the referral called Crowd Science Extra, which is devoted entirely to answering all of your questions. Just visit the referral show page on Apple Podcasts and hit the button which says try free to begin your free trial today. And there you go. That is the secret to becoming hench and packing on size and muscle. Hope you enjoyed this week and learnt lots of actionable tools. I'll catch you next week.